Okay, so the material we're looking at today is a beginner-focused audio conversation. It's designed to tackle that classic English learner problem. I can understand, but I can't speak.
A very common and very frustrating barrier.
Exactly. And the piece does a great job highlighting things like being nervous or translating in your head. I really like its course structure, the 5 simple rules. It feels accessible.
It is. The conversational style is encouraging, and that focus on broken English is okay is, I think, exactly what a stuck learner needs to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But I do wonder if we can maximize the impact of those rules. Make sure the listener not only hears them, but actually retains and uses them, especially right at the start.
That's a great point, and I think that's where we should start. The opening section could be much more impactful if it explicitly defined the root causes of that speaking block right away.
Okay, so get more technical faster.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, it identifies the student's feelings, nervousness, overthinking.
Right.
But the technical reasons behind those feelings, like the lack of active practice or the mental translation, they're kind of sprinkled in with motivational bits. It delays the why.
I see what you mean. The weakness is that the listener already knows they feel nervous.
Of course they do. That's their problem.
Telling them that again doesn't really move them forward. What they're looking for is a diagnosis for why their brain is freezing up. The material mentions mental translation and fear of mistakes, which are the core issues, but they aren't presented as a sharp, actionable diagnosis right at the top.
Precisely. So the suggestion is to front-load those barriers, create a concise diagnosis section right after the student explains their problem.
So the rules that follow feel less like general tips and more like direct countermeasures.
Exactly. You establish a very clear problem-solution pathway. It justifies the work they're about to do.
Okay, so in practice, what would that sound like?
Well, instead of the current flow, you could summarize the barriers much more sharply. The argument in the material is basically that the speaking gap exists for 2 technical reasons, right?
Right.
First, speaking is an active skill. Listening is passive. It needs dedicated motor practice, almost like a sport.
And the second one is the mental translation.
The mental translation. It's crippling because it slows your thinking speed down to a crawl. It's like a bad internet connection in your head.
That framing, the passive versus active skill and the mental lag, is so much more powerful. It gives the listener something concrete to fight against, not just a vague feeling of anxiety.
And then you can make the connection so much cleaner. You can link Rule 1, stop translating, directly back to that diagnosis of slow mental agility.
I see. So you'd say something like, the reason you're slow is because you're translating. Rule 1 is the tool we use to break that specific habit.
Exactly. You make the connection undeniable. By defining the problem so sharply at the beginning, all 5 solutions immediately become more valuable because the listener knows exactly what part of the problem they're fixing.
Okay, I really like that. And speaking of the solutions, that actually leads right into my next point, which is about the structure of those rules themselves.
Let's get into it.
So, the 5 rules: stop translating, speak broken English, use chunks, talk to yourself, and 5-minute practice. They're all excellent on their own.
They are.
But for an audio format where someone can't just look at a checklist, clustering them into 2 or 3 major action areas would, I think, seriously improve how well someone remembers them.
That's a really sharp point about audio retention. You're right. The weakness here is that rules 4 and 5, talk to yourself daily, and 5-minute practice, they feel very similar.
They overlap heavily. They're both about the same core behavior, solo consistency. Splitting them up could actually dilute the main message, which is to build a habit.
I agree. They really should be one single non-negotiable command. And what about Rule 3, use chunks? I think, let me try. It's a great tool, but it's presented as its own strategy.
It is. And I'd argue those chunks are actually a tool to help someone execute Rule 2, which is speak broken English.
How so?
Well, if you're going to speak broken English, you need some kind of scaffolding to feel safe, right? The chunks provide that structure.
Ah, I see. So the suggestion is to simplify. We're not talking about 5 rules anymore. We're talking about maybe 3 thematic pillars. Something like mindset, output, and consistency.
Exactly. And then you can slot the specific advice, like using chunks, into those pillars where it fits logically.
Okay, I like that a lot. So let's try to build that. Let's start with consistency. We combine rules 4 and 5.
Right. And you get a clear action pillar. Maybe call it daily solo output.
Yeah, daily solo output. That emphasizes that the 5 minutes daily is the key, and that you don't need a partner, you just need yourself. That's a much more powerful command.
It is. Okay, so that's one pillar. Now, what about the others? We have Rule 1, stop translating, and then Rules 2 and 3, speak broken English and use chunks.
I think the obvious move is to merge rules 2 and 3. You could create a pillar called something like prioritize communication over accuracy.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second. Is there a risk of confusing the beginner? I mean, speak broken English is about accepting mistakes, but use chunks is about using correct, pre-made phrases. Aren't they kind of opposites?
That's a fair question, but I actually think they support each other perfectly for a beginner.
Go on.
When your goal is just communication, you need to be fast. If you give yourself permission for your sentences to be a bit broken, like, I go market yesterday, you're prioritizing speed.
Okay.
The chunks are just the safety net. They're the starter motor. They let you start your sentence quickly and correctly, which buys your brain a split second to figure out the rest, even if the rest is a little broken.
So the chunk, I feel that, is just a way to kickstart a sentence that might end up being imperfect, but at least the message gets out.
Exactly. It's a tool you use within the broader strategy of just getting the message delivered. The goal is communication, not perfection.
I'm sold. So by unifying those, we get a much simpler framework. Pillar 1, mindset. That's stop translating.
Pillar 2, output quality, which is prioritize communication and use chunks as a tool.
And pillar 3, consistency, our daily solo output.
Yeah, that 3-pillar structure is so much easier to remember and apply every day, especially for a listener who's just hearing it.
It gives them a real mental model to work with. Okay, so that brings us to our third and final point. We need to think about the long game.
The what's next?
Exactly. The material is great for beginners, but it should also offer a clear path to, level up. It needs to show them how to turn all that passive listening into high-quality active output.
That's a crucial point for fulfilling the ultimate promise of fluency. The weakness right now is that the conversation just sort of ends once the beginner feels okay with speaking simple sentences.
Right, which is a huge win, but it's not the end of the journey. The source notes actually contain some fantastic advanced ideas like mimicking masters or shadowing, and making that jump from passive to active learning.
And by not including them, we risk leaving the listener stuck in that basic, maybe even choppy, conversational stage. They've overcome the block, but they don't know how to achieve real flow or intonation. The material needs a graduation plan.
So the suggestion here is to add a final advanced practice section, a where to go from here, and it should introduce 2 key next-level strategies.
Okay, what are they?
The 2 strategies would be first, shadowing or mimicry, and second, active reflection or summarization. This gives the beginner something to aim for after they conquer that initial fear.
Let's break that down. The mimicking masters part. The notes explicitly say imitating native speakers helps with pronunciation and intonation. That's the next step beyond just vocabulary, isn't it?
It is. It's a very subtle but powerful shift. The suggestions are great. Watch videos, repeat what you hear, match the tone, even the facial expressions.
It's so actionable. It shows the listener how to go from just delivering a message to delivering it naturally. That's what fluency really is.
A great way to explain shadowing is to tell them to try and match the melody of the speaker's voice, almost like they're humming along. Don't worry about the meaning at first, just the rhythm and the flow.
That's fascinating. You're forcing them to internalize the sound patterns, not just the words. Okay, and what about the second strategy, the transition to active learning?
Well, this goes all the way back to our first point about passive versus active skills.
Right.
The material mentions summarization. The idea that you should try to summarize it in English after you watch or read something. This is the critical next step.
So once a learner is comfortable with their 5 minutes of just talking about their day, they have to start pushing themselves.
Exactly. They have to start summarizing passive input. a movie they watched, an article they read. They have to force their brain to engage proactively.
It takes things they understood passively and forces their brain to retrieve and repackage those ideas using only English tools.
And that right there is the ultimate cure for the root problem we identified at the very beginning: mental translation.
Ah, it all ties together.
It does, because when you summarize, you don't have time to translate word for word. You have to access the idea and rebuild it in English.
That practice is what builds that mental agility to switch between languages seamlessly, because it's no longer about translating words, it's about conveying ideas.
Precisely. And adding this ensures the material doesn't just solve the initial block, but it gives the listener a real roadmap to true fluency. It gives the product longevity.
That feels like a very complete critique. The foundation of this piece is clearly solid, but optimizing the action plan really takes it to the next level.
I agree. So just to recap, we focused on 3 key areas. First, sharpening that introduction with a clear technical diagnosis, naming the barriers right away, passive learning, and the lag from mental translation.
Then, second, we simplified the 5 rules into 3 memorable pillars: mindset, output quality, and in daily consistency to really improve retention for the listener.
And finally, we added that clear pathway to fluency by integrating advanced techniques like shadowing for rhythm and summarizing for mental agility. It shows the learner what to do after the fear is gone.
These changes, making the rules easier to remember and then showing the listener how to graduate from basic speaking to mastering flow, I think they'll really strengthen the overall impact. It feels like a complete journey now, not just a starting push.
Absolutely. The core advice is spot on, which is why I'm so keen to help strengthen its delivery. I genuinely look forward to seeing the revised conversation when you submit it back for another critique.